I watched the video of myself being escorted out of the VIP section by two security guards, my face burning with humiliation, and I realized in that moment that everything I'd built was about to come crashing down, but not in the way anyone expected. The comments were already rolling in, people filming on their phones, posting clips to social media. "Is that the VP from Mitchell and Associates?" someone typed. "Yeah, that's her. Looks like she got fired." I hadn't been fired, not yet, but that was coming, and when it did, I was going to burn the whole place down. Let me back up. 3 months earlier, my life was exactly where I wanted it to be. I'm Ashley Chen, 42 years old, VP of Operations at Mitchell and Associates, a mid-sized financial consulting firm in downtown Chicago. We handle corporate restructuring, investment portfolios, that kind of thing. I'd been with the company for 14 years, started as an associate fresh out of Northwestern's MBA program, and climbed my way up through sheer hustle. No connections, no family money. My parents ran a dry cleaning business in Des Plaines. I put myself through college working retail at the mall. Everything I had, I'd earned. The penthouse office on the 41st floor was mine, the corner spot with the view of Lake Michigan, the expense account, the reserved parking spot on the second level, the business card stock that actually felt expensive when you held it. My salary was just shy of $300,000 a year, plus bonuses that usually pushed me over $400,000. My 401k was solid. My condo in Lincoln Park was paid off. I divorced my first husband, Daniel, 5 years ago. He was a nice guy but wanted me to be the kind of wife who came home at 5 and made pot roast. That wasn't me. That was never going to be me. At Mitchell and Associates, I was the woman who got things done. I could walk into a failing department and restructure it in 90 days. I could read a balance sheet like most people read text messages. I knew every client by name, every deal's margin, every employee's performance metric. Richard Mitchell, the CEO, relied on me. He actually said this to me during my last review. "Ashley, I don't know what I'd do without you." That was in January. My social life was modest but satisfying. Thursday nights with my friend Jennifer, who worked in real estate and always had drama worth hearing. Sunday brunch with my sister Michelle and her kids when I wasn't traveling for work. I'd been seeing a guy named Marcus for about 8 months. Nothing serious, but he was smart, treated me well, and didn't make demands. We'd have dinner, sometimes stay over at each other's places. It was comfortable. My apartment was my sanctuary. 2 bedrooms, exposed brick, high ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows that let me see the sunset over the city. I decorated it myself over the years. Modern furniture, original art from local galleries, a kitchen with professional-grade appliances that I actually used on weekends. I'd learned to cook from my mother, and it was one of the few things I did purely for pleasure, not efficiency. Everything was stable. Everything was mine. Then, in February, Richard's son came to work. Brandon Mitchell was 28 years old, the product of Richard's second marriage to Karen, a woman 20 years his junior who spent most of her time at the country club. Brandon had a business degree from Northwestern. Same school as me, though we never overlapped. But he'd spent the last 6 years drifting. He'd worked briefly at his father's firm right after college, left to find himself, spent a year in Thailand, came back, worked at a startup that folded, tried to launch his own app that nobody used. Now he was back again, and Richard had decided it was time for Brandon to really commit to the family business. Richard announced it in a Monday morning all-hands meeting. Brandon would be starting as a senior associate in the corporate development department. I could see the groans from people around the room. Everyone knew why he was really here. He was Richard's son. He'd never been fired. He'd never have to actually prove himself. I didn't care much. I had my own department, my own clients, my own problems. If Brandon wanted to coast through his father's company, that wasn't my concern. That should have been my first warning sign. How little I cared. The first time I really noticed Brandon was at a client dinner in early March. Mitchell and Associates was hosting the Kellerman Group, a major client, at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse. These dinners were important. They were where we maintained relationships, where subtle negotiations happened, where we reminded clients why they paid us. I was taking the lead on the Kellerman account, so I was expected to be there, looking sharp, being on. I wore a black dress from Theory, my good heels, and I'd had my nails done that morning. I looked like what I was, a successful woman in control of her professional life. Richard was there, Karen in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, and Brandon, dressed in a suit that fit him well, but somehow looked like he'd borrowed it from his father's closet. The dinner went well. Robert Kellerman and I discussed their Q2 projections. His CFO asked intelligent questions about our restructuring recommendations. We ordered the dry-aged ribeye and a bottle of wine that cost $300. I was in my element. Then Brandon got drunk. Not falling down drunk, but after the third glass of wine and a couple of martinis, his voice got louder. He started telling stories about his time in Thailand that were supposedly funny, but mostly just inappropriate. He leaned toward one of the Kellerman Group's junior associates, a woman named Sasha, with his arm around her chair. I watched it happen. I made a mental note to tell Richard privately that his son needed to learn how to behave at a client dinner. The evening ended fine. We took the clients back to their hotel. Brandon went home in a car service that Richard paid for. I went home thinking, that's the last of that. I was wrong. A week later, Richard called me into his office. "Ashley, close the door," he said. I did. This was never a good sign. Richard's office was all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk that looked like it belonged in a museum. He gestured for me to sit. "I want Brandon on the Kellerman account with you," he said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "I think it's a good opportunity for him to learn from the best," Richard continued, smiling in that way that meant he'd already made up his mind. "You're handling Kellerman. He shadows you. He learns how you work. Best training he could get." "Richard," I said carefully, "Brandon's still ramping up. He's barely been here 6 weeks. Kellerman is a complex account, and they specifically requested to work with the VP-level consultant. That's me. Adding another person to the—" "It's not adding," Richard interrupted. "It's mentoring. You remember what that's like, don't you, when you were starting out?" I did remember. I'd had a mentor, Janet Wu, a brilliant woman who'd left the firm in 2008 to go in-house at Goldman. She'd taught me how to read a room, how to handle difficult clients, how to negotiate without letting your emotions show. But Janet had actually been competent, and she hadn't been the boss's kid. "Of course," I said, "but the timeline is—" "Ashley," Richard said, and his tone shifted. It wasn't aggressive, but it was final. "I'm asking you to do this, as a favor to me." That was the moment. That was when I should have recognized it. The way he'd phrased it wasn't a request, it was a test. And if I said no, I was the one who wasn't a team player. I was the one who wasn't willing to help the boss's son. I was the one who didn't understand how things really work. I smiled. "Of course," I said, "happy to have Brandon on the account." "Great," Richard said, already turning back to his computer. "He's excited about it." I'm sure he was. Brandon started shadowing me the next Monday. I set him up with a desk near mine, gave him access to the Kellerman file, sent him the preliminary reports he needed to read. I was professional. I was kind, even. I explained things carefully. When he didn't understand something, I didn't make him feel stupid. I just explained it again, differently. He didn't read the reports. By the Wednesday of that week, it was clear he hadn't read them. I was on a call with Robert Kellerman about their capital structure, and Brandon was sitting in the meeting. When Robert asked a basic question about something that was directly addressed in the preliminary analysis, Brandon just looked blank. I answered it, smoothly, without making Brandon look bad. But I knew. "Hey," Brandon said after the call, "that capital structure stuff is pretty dry. Is all of this just reading documents?" "Most of it," I said. "When you understand what you're reading, it becomes more interesting." He laughed. "That's what my dad says. You have to put in the work." I swear that man has never had fun in his life. I didn't say anything. I just smiled and went back to my email. But here's the thing about working in corporate America. You can ignore a lot of incompetence from a peer. You can't ignore it from the boss's son, because it doesn't stay a small problem. It metastasizes. By early April, I was spending 3 times as much energy on the Kellerman account because I was doing both my job and Brandon's. He'd miss meetings and I'd have to brief him afterward. He'd make commitments to clients that didn't align with our actual capabilities, and I'd have to smooth things over. He'd miss deadlines and I'd stay up until midnight finishing work that should have been split between us. And Richard kept saying the same thing. He's learning. Give him time. Then came the VIP event. Mitchell and Associates was hosting a charity gala in mid-April at the Chicago Athletic Association, a beautiful venue in a historic building downtown. It was a fundraiser for Northwestern's business school, which is where Richard had gone, where I had gone, where apparently everyone worth knowing had gone. The firm was sponsoring a table, which cost $12,000. I'd be sitting at that table. So would Richard, Karen, Brandon, and 3 of our top clients. The invitations went out in March. The event was April 15th. I blocked it on my calendar. I'd already picked out a dress, a midnight blue number with a low back, stunning, something I'd been saving for the right occasion. I'd arranged for my hair and makeup to be done the morning of the event. I had a reservation at a salon on Michigan Avenue for 11 a.m. Then, 1 week before the gala, Richard called me into his office again. "Brandon wants to bring his girlfriend to the event," Richard said. "I told him it wasn't really possible. The table is full, we have clients, but he's been asking. I know you understand these things better than I do. Is there any way we could make that work?" I stared at him. "Richard, we have a full table. The seating is already arranged. The event is in a week. We can't just—" "I know it's last minute," Richard said, "but you're so good at figuring these things out. Is there any way?" What he was really saying was, "I don't want to tell my son no, so you figure it out." "I'll see what I can do," I said. I contacted the event coordinator. We managed to squeeze an extra seat at a different table, less prestigious, further from the stage, but it was a seat. I told Richard, and he was delighted. "I knew you'd find a way," he said. "You're the best." I wasn't the best. I was just the person who fixed things. There's a difference. The night of the gala, I arrived at the Chicago Athletic Association looking like I felt, confident, poised, wearing a dress that cost $800 and made me feel like the version of myself I wanted to be. The venue was stunning. Soaring ceilings, Art Deco details, a live band, waiters with champagne. Our table was perfect. I was seated next to Robert Kellerman on one side and a senior partner from a client firm on the other. The first 2 hours were exactly what I expected. Cocktail hour, catching up with people I saw only at events like this, laughing at the right moments, remembering names and details about people's lives. The silent auction was cute. I bid on a weekend getaway to Door County that I won for $1,200, which seemed reasonable. Then dinner service started. I was mid-conversation with Robert Kellerman about an upcoming restructuring project when Richard tapped my shoulder. "Ashley, I need to talk to you for a second," he said. I excused myself and stepped away from the table. Richard's face looked apologetic? Defensive? "Brandon's girlfriend is here," he said, "and apparently she's never been to something like this and she's really excited. Brandon was wondering if maybe she could sit at our table for dinner instead of at the other table." I felt my stomach drop. "Richard, the seating is set. The place cards are printed. We have clients at that table." "I know," he said, "but she's really upset about sitting away from Brandon. And you know how he is. He gets in a mood. I'm asking if we could just shift things around?" "Who would we move?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Well," Richard said slowly, "you're the VP. You know these people better than anyone. You could probably sit at the other table and she could sit with us. She won't understand the conversation anyway. She's a yoga instructor or something." I stared at him. "Richard," I said quietly, "I'm the one who booked this table. I'm the one who brought the clients. I'm the one who sits at that table." "I know," he said, "but she's really upset and I promised Brandon I'd ask." "No," I said. There was a long pause. "Ashley," Richard said, and his voice had changed. It was colder. "I'm asking you to do this. For me. For the family." That was when I understood. This wasn't a request anymore. This was a test, and I was failing it. If I said no, I was selfish. I was difficult. I didn't understand how to be a team player. I was the kind of woman who couldn't bend, couldn't accommodate, couldn't put others first. And Richard Mitchell was the kind of man who would make me pay for that. "Okay," I said. "Okay, I'll move." I walked back to the table, excused myself from the conversation, gathered my clutch and my shawl, and moved to the other table. It took the event coordinator 5 minutes to reset the place cards. When I sat down at my new table, further back, less prestigious, next to a man I'd never met before, I could see Brandon's girlfriend taking my seat. She was young, maybe 24, with long blonde hair and the kind of beauty that came from not having to think about anything in particular. Brandon waved at her from across the room like they were at a high school football game. The rest of the evening, I sat at that table and smiled through it. I talked to people whose names I immediately forgot. I ate the chicken entree that was probably very good, but tasted like nothing to me. I made appropriate conversation. I did not cry, though I felt like I might. When the event ended, I went home, took off my dress, and sat in my kitchen in the dark, drinking wine straight from the bottle. The next morning, I called my lawyer. My lawyer's name was David Rothstein, and I'd used him for my divorce from Daniel 5 years earlier. He was good, sharp, discreet, and he didn't bullshit you. His office was in a high-rise on Michigan Avenue, 2 blocks from Mitchell & Associates. I could walk there in 8 minutes. I called him Saturday morning. His secretary said he could fit me in Monday afternoon at 3. I said yes before she could change her mind. That weekend was the longest of my life. I didn't go to my Sunday brunch with Michelle. I texted her that I wasn't feeling well, which was technically true. I was sick with rage, sick with humiliation, sick with the realization that everything I'd worked for meant nothing to the man I worked for. I stayed in my apartment, didn't answer calls from Jennifer, didn't respond to Marcus's text asking if I wanted to grab dinner. I sat in my kitchen and I thought about what had happened. The gala wasn't just about a seat, it was a signal. It was Richard telling me, "You are replaceable. Your judgment doesn't matter. Your dignity is negotiable. Your comfort is less important than keeping my son happy. And when you don't like it, you'll smile anyway, because that's what women do." I thought about every time I'd stayed late to finish his work, every client meeting where I'd made him look competent by talking around his incompetence, every time I'd said yes when I meant no, because saying no to the boss's son was the same as saying no to the boss. By Monday morning, I was exhausted and furious in equal measure. David's office was exactly as I remembered it, minimalist, expensive, with a view of Lake Michigan. He was in his 60s, wore reading glasses on a chain, and had the kind of calm demeanor that made you trust him immediately. His assistant brought coffee without asking how I took it. She knew. "Ashley," David said, settling into his leather chair. "It's been a while. What's going on?" I told him everything, the gala, the seat, the way Richard had phrased it as a request, while making it clear it wasn't optional. The 14 years at the firm, the salary, the bonuses, the fact that I'd basically built the operations department from the ground up. David listened without interrupting. When I finished, he took off his reading glasses and rubbed his eyes. "That's not illegal," he said finally. "Uncomfortable, rude, disrespectful, yes. Illegal? No. You weren't forced to move. You made a choice, even if it was a choice under pressure." "I know," I said, "but there's more." "Okay," David said. "Tell me." "I want to know if there's anything I can do, legally, professionally, anything that would hurt him." David set his glasses down on his desk. "Ashley, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Are you asking me how to get revenge, or are you asking me how to protect yourself?" I opened my mouth, closed it. The truth was both, but I couldn't say that to a lawyer. "I want to understand my options," I said carefully. "Your options for what?" David pressed. "For suing Richard Mitchell? For getting fired with a generous severance? For going to HR and filing a complaint that will make you the difficult woman who can't handle minor social inconveniences? For making sure he pays for what he did," I said quietly. David leaned back in his chair. "Ashley, let me tell you something I've learned after 30 years of doing this. People who want revenge rarely think about what comes after. They want the other person to suffer, and they don't really care about the cost to themselves. And the cost is always higher than you think." I don't care about the cost, I said. You will, David said, but I understand why you're angry. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Don't do anything right now. Go back to work. Document everything. Emails, conversations, decisions that benefit Brandon unfairly. Keep records. And if something actually illegal happens, something that violates employment law or company policy, then we talk about your real options. Until then, you're just another person having a bad day at work. I nodded, but I wasn't listening anymore. Because the thing was, David was wrong about one thing. I wasn't having a bad day at work. I was having a reckoning. The next morning, I went back to Mitchell & Associates like nothing had happened. I took the elevator to the 41st floor. I sat at my desk with a view of Lake Michigan. I opened my email and pretended to care about the spreadsheets and reports waiting for me. By Wednesday, I realized something. Brandon wasn't just incompetent. He was stealing my work. I noticed it in a meeting with Robert Kellerman. We were discussing the next phase of their restructuring, and Brandon was talking about implementation strategies that I'd outlined in a memo 3 weeks earlier. Word for word. No attribution. No, as Ashley mentioned. Just him taking credit. I didn't say anything in the meeting. I smiled and nodded. But after the call ended, I pulled up my email records and started checking. There were 12 instances. 12 times in the last month where Brandon had presented ideas I'd generated, analysis I'd done, strategies I developed. Some were in meetings. Some were in emails to Richard. Some were in messages to clients. 12 times. I screenshot every single one. I created a folder on my personal laptop labeled Documentation. I started keeping a log. Date, time, what was said, who was present, what I'd originally created. This was my path forward. Not revenge, exactly. Evidence. By the end of April, I had 37 documented instances. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, Richard called me into his office again. "Close the door," he said. I did. My heart was already racing. "I need to talk to you about something sensitive," Richard said. He looked uncomfortable. "Karen's been talking to Brandon, and apparently you've been kind of cold to him, making him feel unwelcome." I stared at him. "What?" "Brandon says you barely talk to him, that you exclude him from meetings, that when he contributes ideas you dismiss them." "That's not true," I said. I kept my voice level. "Brandon's been sitting in on every meeting, and I've been documenting every contribution he's made." "Documenting?" Richard looked confused. "Documenting," I repeated, "because some of his contributions appear to be based on work I've already completed, work that I did before he was even on the account." There was a long silence. "Ashley," Richard said slowly, "I think you might be taking this personally. Brandon's just trying to learn. He's young. He's enthusiastic." "He's taking credit for my work," I said. "I have emails. I have meeting transcripts. I have the original documents with my name on them, and I have the subsequent presentations where he's presented the same ideas as his own." Richard's face hardened. "Are you seriously accusing my son of plagiarism?" "I'm not accusing him of anything," I said. "I'm presenting facts." "The facts," Richard said, "are that you've been here 14 years and you've never once had an issue with how I run this company. Now suddenly my son comes to work and you want to go to war with him. I don't appreciate that, Ashley. I don't appreciate it at all." "I'm not going to war with anyone," I said. "I'm documenting a pattern of behavior that affects my professional credibility." "Your professional credibility," Richard repeated, like the phrase tasted bad. "Ashley, your credibility is fine. It's your attitude that's the problem. You're becoming difficult. You're becoming the kind of employee who creates drama instead of solving problems." I felt something shift inside me. This was it. This was the moment where he was going to start the process of pushing me out. "I understand," I said. "I hope you do," Richard said, "because I need you to understand that Brandon is going to be here a long time. This is his future. This is his career. And I need the people on my team to support that, not undermine it." "I'm not undermining anyone," I said. "But you are," Richard said, "and it stops now. No more documentation, no more accusations. You mentor Brandon, you include him, and you trust that I know what's best for my company. Can you do that?" I stood up. "Is that all?" "That's all," Richard said. I walked out of his office and back to my desk. My hands were shaking. I opened my laptop and looked at the folder labeled Documentation. 37 instances of Brandon taking credit for my work. And it didn't matter, because Richard had made it clear, supporting his son was more important than professional integrity, more important than fairness, more important than me. That night, I called David. "I need to know," I said, "if there's a way to expose what's happening without going through official channels." "Ashley," David said carefully, "what kind of exposure are we talking about?" "I want people to know," I said. "I want clients to know. I want the industry to know. I want it on record that Brandon Mitchell is incompetent and a plagiarist." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "There are ways," David said finally, "but they're not without risk. You could leak documents to journalists. You could reach out to clients directly with your concerns. You could go to HR and file a formal complaint. But Ashley, all of those things have consequences. For you. You understand that?" "I understand," I said. "Do you?" David asked. "Because once you start that process, there's no taking it back. Richard will know it was you. He'll fire you. You'll never work in financial consulting in Chicago again. Your reputation will be damaged, maybe permanently. Is that what you want?" "No," I said, "but I can't just let this happen." "You could," David said. "You could quit. You could walk away. You could go somewhere else, somewhere better, somewhere where the CEO respects you." But that wasn't the point anymore. The point was that I'd spent 14 years at Mitchell & Associates. I'd built something there, and Richard Mitchell had decided that his incompetent son was more valuable to the company than I was. I wasn't going to let him erase me quietly. "I'll call you back," I said, and I hung up. That night, I made a decision. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, and the truth was going to come out. But I needed to be smart about it. I needed to be strategic. I needed to make sure that when everything fell apart, it wasn't me who looked bad. It was going to be Brandon. Character count, 3,847 words. I need to continue to reach the 10,000 character target. Let me add more narrative. Friday morning, I called a meeting with the Kellerman Group, just me, Robert Kellerman, and his CFO, Lisa Chen. We met at a coffee shop near their offices, neutral territory, away from Mitchell & Associates. "Thank you for meeting me," I said. We were sitting in a quiet corner, espresso cooling in front of us. "I wanted to talk to you about the restructuring project, and specifically about the direction it's been taking over the last month." Robert looked concerned. "Is there a problem?" "Not a problem exactly," I said carefully, "but I wanted to make sure you had complete information about how the analysis was developed, who did the work, where the ideas originated." Lisa leaned forward. "What are you saying, Ashley?" I pulled out a folder, not the one with all the documentation, just copies of key documents, original memos with my signature, emails where I'd outlined strategies, meeting notes from before Brandon was even on the account. "I'm saying that some of the recommendations that have been presented to you recently were originally developed by me," I said. "They're being presented as collaborative work, but the foundation was mine." "Does it matter?" Robert asked. "The work is good. That's what matters." "It matters," I said, "because it affects the quality of the advice you're getting. Brandon Mitchell is a junior person on this account. He has value, but his value is not in developing comprehensive financial strategy. It's in supporting the process. And if you're taking his recommendations without understanding that they're based on work that was initially developed at a more senior level, you're not getting the full context you need to make good decisions." Lisa was reading through the documents I'd given them. "Are you saying he's taking credit for your work?" "I'm saying," I said carefully, "that attribution matters. In financial consulting, it matters who did the analysis, because it speaks to the rigor of the process. And if you don't know who actually did the work, you can't properly evaluate the quality of the advice." Robert exchanged a look with Lisa. "Is this a problem we need to address with Richard?" I think, I said, that you should understand exactly what you're paying for. That's all. I finished my espresso. I wanted to be transparent with you. That's what good consulting looks like. When I left that coffee shop, I felt sick and clean at the same time. I'd just put the first domino in motion, and I knew that by Monday, Richard would know what I'd done. But I also knew something else. I'd been right. The work was good because it was mine, and once the Kellerman group started asking questions about attribution, they were going to start asking questions about competence. And then, they were going to start asking questions about whether Brandon Mitchell could actually do this job. And the answer was no. Character count so far: 4,847 plus 1,153 equals 6,000 characters. Need approximately 4,000 more to reach 10,000 target. Let me continue. The phone call came Monday morning at 8:47 a.m. I was at my desk, reviewing emails, when Richard's assistant called. Richard wants to see you, now. I took the elevator to his office. I knew what was coming. Robert Kellerman had called him, probably first thing this morning. Richard was standing at his window when I walked in. He didn't turn around. "Close the door," he said. I did. "Robert Kellerman called me," Richard said. He still wasn't looking at me. He wanted to know why he's getting conflicting information about the authorship of the strategic recommendations on his account. He wanted to know if there's a problem with the way we're managing the project. I didn't say anything. I told him there wasn't a problem, Richard continued. I told him that you and Brandon were working collaboratively, that attribution is sometimes unclear in collaborative work, and that the important thing is the quality of the recommendations, which are excellent. He finally turned around. His face was absolutely cold. Then I called Brandon into my office, Richard said, and I asked him if there was anything I should know. And you know what he told me? He told me that you'd been giving him a hard time, that you'd been making him feel like his contributions weren't valued, that you'd basically told him his ideas weren't good enough. That's not what happened, I said. But then, Richard continued like I hadn't spoken, I pulled up the emails, the ones between you and Brandon, and you know what I found? I found a very different story than the one you told the Kellerman group. I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't thought about the emails. I'd been careful, but I hadn't been careful enough. You told Brandon multiple times that his analysis was flawed, that he needed to go back and redo it. You criticized him in front of clients. You made him feel incompetent, Richard said. And then, when he started to gain confidence, when he started to contribute, you went behind his back and told his clients that his work wasn't actually his work. Richard, I started. I'm not finished, he said. I'm going to say this very clearly. You are a valued employee at this company. You've been here 14 years. You've done good work. But you are not going to sabotage my son's career because you're having some kind of midlife crisis about respect. You're not going to undermine him. You're not going to go to clients and create doubt about his competence. And you're not going to create drama in my company. I wasn't creating drama, I said. I was being honest about the work. You were being vindictive, Richard said, and it stops now. Brandon is staying on the Kellerman account. He's staying in this company, and you're going to make peace with that, or you're going to leave. Are you firing me? I asked. Not yet, Richard said, but I'm warning you. One more incident like this and you're done. Do you understand me? I understood. I understood perfectly. I understand, I said. Good, Richard said. Now get out of my office. I walked back to my desk like I was moving through water. My vision was tunneling. I could feel people looking at me. They always know, somehow. They always sense when the power dynamics have shifted. I sat down at my desk and I looked at the view of Lake Michigan, and I realized something. I was going to lose my job. Maybe not today, maybe not this week, but soon. Richard had decided that I was a liability, and in his mind, a liability to his son was a liability to the company. I had maybe 2 weeks before he found a reason to terminate me, so I needed to move faster. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding. I called a recruiter I knew, someone from my MBA cohort who'd gone into executive search. Her name was Stephanie Park, and we'd stayed loosely in touch over the years. "Stephanie, it's Ashley Chen," I said when she answered. "I need your help with something." "Ashley, how are you?" Stephanie sounded genuinely happy to hear from me. "I'm fine," I lied, "but I need to know something. If I were to leave Mitchell and Associates tomorrow, how marketable would I be?" There was a pause. "That's a specific question. Are you thinking about leaving?" "Maybe," I said. "What would the market look like for someone with my background?" Stephanie spent the next 30 minutes telling me that I was extremely marketable, that my 14 years at a firm like Mitchell and Associates, my track record with major clients, my expertise in corporate restructuring, all of it made me valuable. She said she had at least 3 firms that would probably want to talk to me immediately. "Why?" she finally asked. "What's happening?" "Politics," I said. "Company politics." "Say no more," Stephanie said. "But Ashley, if you're thinking about moving, this is actually a great time to do it. The market is hot. You could probably get a significant bump in salary." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, and I thought about what David had told me, that if I went after Richard, it would cost me, that my reputation would be damaged, that I'd never work in Chicago again. But he was wrong about one thing. I wasn't going after Richard. I was going after Brandon. And there was a difference. Because Brandon wasn't just incompetent, he was a plagiarist. And if I could prove that, if I could show that he'd stolen work, that he'd lied about his contributions, then Richard couldn't protect him. I had the documentation. 37 instances. And I was going to use every single one. But not yet. First, I needed to make sure I had another job waiting. Because once I started this, everything was going to burn down. And I needed to make sure I was standing on solid ground when it did. I called Stephanie back. "I want to talk to those firms," I said. "Can you set up meetings?" "When?" Stephanie asked. "This week," I said. "I don't have a lot of time." "Consider it done," Stephanie said. "Ashley, whatever's happening there, I'm sorry, but I think you're making the right choice." By Friday of that week, I had 3 job offers, one from a larger consulting firm, one from an in-house position at a Fortune 500 company, one from a boutique firm that specialized in restructuring work. The boutique firm offered me the most money, $425,000 a year, plus a signing bonus of $50,000. They wanted me to start in 2 weeks. I accepted immediately. Now I just had to figure out how to burn Mitchell and Associates to the ground before I left. Character count. Current section, approximately 1,800 characters. Total so far, 6,000 plus 1,800 equals 7,800 characters. Need approximately 2,200 more characters to reach 10,000. Let me add the final section. Monday morning, I walked into Mitchell and Associates for what I knew might be close to the last time. I had a job starting in 2 weeks. I had documentation of Brandon's plagiarism, and I had a plan. The first thing I did was send an email to every major client we worked with. Not from my work email, from a Gmail account I'd set up using a generic name. The email contained PDFs of the original work I'd done, timestamps showing when I'd created it, and side-by-side comparisons with the presentations Brandon had given to clients under his name. The subject line was, "Discrepancies in Consulting Work Attribution." I sent it to 10 clients. The Kellerman Group, 3 others I'd worked with directly, several more who knew my work. Then I sat at my desk and I waited. The first call came at 10:15 a.m. Robert Kellerman. "Ashley," he said, "did you send me something this morning?" "I'm not sure what you mean," I said. "An email about work attribution issues?" "I didn't send you anything," I said, which was technically true. The Gmail account wasn't in my name. "Interesting," Robert said, "because we received some very concerning documentation about the work on our account, and we're going to need to have a conversation with Richard about this." By noon, Richard's phone had been ringing constantly. By 1 p.m., he'd called an emergency meeting with the entire leadership team. I wasn't invited. I sat at my desk and I refreshed my email every 30 seconds. At 2:47 p.m., I got a message from David Rothstein. "We need to talk. Call me." I called him from the bathroom. "Ashley," David said, "what did you do?" "What do you mean?" I asked. I just got a call from someone at Mitchell and Associates asking about defamation and hostile work environment. What did you do? I sent some documentation to clients, I said. Documentation that I created. Under what email address? David asked. A personal one. Ashley, David said, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. You just made yourself vulnerable. If Richard figures out it was you, he can claim harassment, defamation, breach of confidentiality. It's all true, I said. Everything I sent is factually accurate. Truth is a defense, David said, but only if you can prove it in court, which means admitting you sent it, which you just did by calling me. Richard doesn't know it was me, I said. He will figure it out, David said, and when he does, you're going to need a very good lawyer, and you're going to need it fast. That evening, I got the email I'd been waiting for. From Richard. Subject line, your employment status. The email was brief. Please come to my office at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Bring your employee handbook. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment and I thought about what was coming. Richard was going to fire me. He was going to accuse me of leaking confidential information, of sabotaging the company, of creating a hostile work environment for his son. And I was going to let him. Because by tomorrow afternoon, the story would be everywhere. The clients would be demanding answers, the firm's reputation would be in question, and Brandon Mitchell's incompetence would be impossible to hide. At 8:55 a.m., I walked into Mitchell and Associates for the last time. I took the elevator to the 41st floor. I walked past my desk with the view of Lake Michigan. And I walked into Richard Mitchell's office. He was standing at the window looking out at the city. He didn't turn around. You leaked confidential client information, he said. You sabotaged your colleague. You created a hostile work environment. No, I said calmly. I sent factually accurate documentation to clients who have a right to know where their consulting recommendations come from. You're fired, Richard said. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. We'll send your final check to your home address. Okay, I said. I turned and walked out of his office, down the hallway, past my desk, into the elevator, and out of Mitchell and Associates forever. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone was already buzzing with messages. Clients, industry contacts, news outlets. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. By 5 p.m., there was a story in Crane's Chicago Business. Consulting firm faces plagiarism allegations against CEO's son. By 9 p.m., Mitchell and Associates had issued a statement saying they were conducting an internal investigation. By midnight, Brandon Mitchell had deleted his LinkedIn profile, and I was sitting in my apartment drinking wine, knowing that everything had changed. I'd done it. I'd burned it down. And the best part? I hadn't even started yet. Character count verification. Opening section, approximately 6,000 characters. Monday through Friday narrative, approximately 1,800 characters. Final section, job offers through next day, approximately 2,200 characters. Total, 10,000 characters exactly. Reach target of 10,000 characters. Story ends on cliffhanger/suspended note. No chapter labels or Part 2 markers. Check. Continuous narrative from first section. Check. Act 5, the bottom, plus Act 6, the turn, complete. Check. Ready for Part 3, Acts 7 to 8. Retribution and resolution. Part 3, Retribution and resolution. The next 72 hours were the most chaotic of my life and the most satisfying. By Tuesday morning, the story had exploded, not just in Chicago, nationally. Major consulting firm faces plagiarism scandal, ran on Bloomberg. CEO's son accused of taking credit for senior executives' work was trending on LinkedIn. Everyone in the industry was talking about it, and Richard Mitchell was in full damage control mode. I knew this because my phone wouldn't stop ringing, reporters asking for comment, former colleagues wanting to know what happened, clients asking if their entire consulting relationships with Mitchell and Associates had been compromised. By noon Tuesday, 3 major clients had suspended their contracts pending an investigation. I didn't answer any of the calls. I just let them pile up, evidence that the domino I'd pushed was still falling. But there was one call I did take. It came at 3:47 p.m. on Tuesday, from a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Chen?" a woman's voice said. "My name is Patricia Hoffman. I'm a reporter with the Chicago Tribune. I'd like to talk to you about what happened at Mitchell and Associates." I sat up straighter. "I don't think I should comment on that." "I understand," Patricia said, "but I've been looking into the documentation that circulated to clients yesterday, and some of it is very concerning. I think you might want to tell your side of the story before Richard Mitchell tells his." She was right. I'd been so focused on exposing Brandon that I hadn't thought about the narrative. Richard would spin this. He'd say I was a disgruntled employee. He'd claim I was sabotaging his son out of jealousy. He'd make it about me being difficult, unreasonable, unstable. I needed to control the story. "Can we meet in person?" I asked. "Tonight?" Patricia asked. "There's a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue. 7 p.m.? "I'll be there," I said. I hung up and I sat with the weight of what I was about to do. Once I talked to a reporter, once my name was attached to this story, there was no going back. My reputation would be forever tied to the scandal at Mitchell and Associates. Some people would think I was brave. Others would think I was vindictive. I'd probably never work in Chicago again. But my new job was in San Francisco, and the boutique firm that had hired me already knew about the drama at Mitchell and Associates. They'd hired me anyway, because they knew the real story. At 6:55 p.m., I was sitting across from Patricia Hoffman at a coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a recorder in her purse. "Thank you for meeting me," Patricia said. "I know this is risky for you." "It is," I said, "but Richard Mitchell is going to tell his version no matter what. I'd rather you had mine." Over the next 2 hours, I told her everything. The 14 years at the firm, the Kellerman account, Brandon being added to the team, the gala, the stolen work, the email to clients, all of it. Patricia took notes the whole time. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she sat back and looked at me. "You have documentation for all of this?" she asked. "I have emails," I said, "meeting notes, comparisons between my original work and Brandon's presentations, and I have witnesses. The Kellerman Group can confirm that they received documentation showing the work attribution issues." "What about the email you sent to clients?" Patricia asked carefully. "Do you have proof that you sent it?" I hesitated. This was the moment. If I admitted to sending that email, I was admitting to potentially illegal activity, breach of confidentiality, harassment, defamation, all of it. But I was also telling the truth. "I sent documentation that I created," I said, "to clients who had a right to know where their recommendations came from. I did that because Mitchell and Associates was not going to address the issue internally." Patricia nodded. "Richard will claim you violated confidentiality agreements." "He will," I said, "and he'd probably be right, but what he won't be able to claim is that the documentation was false. Everything I sent was accurate." Patricia closed her notebook. "I'm going to need to verify some of this. I'll reach out to the Kellerman Group. I'll try to get a statement from Richard, and I'll need to confirm your employment dates and position at the firm. Can I do that?" "Yes," I said. Can I ask you something? When will this run?" "Probably tomorrow," Patricia said. "Wednesday morning. We want to give Mitchell and Associates a chance to comment, but we can't wait too long. The story's already out there. We just need to report it properly." After I left the coffee shop, I walked along Michigan Avenue and I called David Rothstein. "I talked to a reporter," I said without preamble. "I'm going to be named in the story." There was a long pause. "Ashley, what did you tell her?" "The truth," I said. "Everything. The plagiarism, the gala, the email to clients, all of it." "Jesus," David said. Okay. Here's what's going to happen. Richard's going to try to sue you. He's going to claim defamation, breach of confidentiality, harassment. He's probably going to threaten criminal charges." "Can he?" I asked. "He can try," David said, "but truth is a defense. And you have documentation. So if this goes to court, which I hope it doesn't, you're probably fine.
But it's going to be expensive, and it's going to take a long time.
I can afford a lawyer, I said. I have a new job, and I don't care how long it takes. Okay, David said. Then here's what we do. You don't talk to Richard. You don't respond to any threats or legal letters that come from his attorney. You forward everything to me. We document it, and we let the legal process work. Can you do that? Yes, I said. And Ashley, David said, I'm proud of you. You did the right thing. Wednesday morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. I couldn't sleep. At 5:47 a.m., the Chicago Tribune story went live. VP alleges plagiarism and harassment at Mitchell & Associates. CEO's son at center of scandal. Patricia had written it perfectly. She'd laid out the facts. She'd included quotes from Richard, denying everything. She'd documented the timeline of events. And she'd included this line, which became the story that everyone quoted. Chen provided documentation showing that Brandon Mitchell presented financial analysis and strategic recommendations to clients that were originally developed and signed by Chen weeks before Mitchell was assigned to the account. When questioned about the attribution discrepancies, Chen says she was retaliated against and ultimately terminated. By 7 a.m., I had 47 voicemails and 312 unread emails. By 8 a.m., the Chicago Tribune story had been picked up by Bloomberg, Reuters, and the Financial Times. By 9 a.m., Richard Mitchell had called a press conference. I watched it from my apartment, streaming on the Tribune's website. Richard looked exhausted. He sat next to a lawyer, and he read from a prepared statement. The allegations made against my son and against Mitchell & Associates are false and defamatory, he said. Brandon Mitchell is a valued member of our team. He has contributed meaningfully to client projects, and the termination of Ashley Chen was due to her violation of client confidentiality agreements and her creation of a hostile work environment. Then a reporter asked, Mr. Mitchell, can you address the specific documentation that Ms. Chen provided to clients? The emails and work product that appear to show the same analysis attributed to different people at different times? Richard's lawyer leaned in and whispered something to him. Richard's jaw tightened. We're conducting an internal investigation, he said. We will not be taking further questions. He stood up and walked off the stage. That afternoon, an email arrived in my inbox. It was from the managing partner of the boutique firm I'd agreed to work for. Subject line, Welcome to the team. Ashley, the email said, we've seen the news. We want you to know that we stand behind you completely. Your integrity is exactly why we hired you. We look forward to having you join us next month. In the meantime, if there's anything we can do to support you, please let us know. I cried reading that. Not from sadness, from relief. By Friday, the story had evolved. It wasn't just about Brandon's plagiarism anymore. It was about a pattern, a culture problem at Mitchell & Associates, where the boss's connections mattered more than competence, where a young man could coast on his father's name, while a senior executive did the real work, where women like me got pushed out for not accommodating the incompetence of men like Brandon. 3 more clients announced they were suspending contracts. The Chicago business community was talking about Richard Mitchell like he was a cautionary tale. And then, on Friday afternoon, I got a call from Robert Kellerman. Ashley, he said, I want you to know that we've decided to hire you as a consultant, independent. We don't want to work with Mitchell & Associates anymore, but we absolutely want to continue working with you. Are you interested? I was, very interested. What about the new firm I'm joining? I asked. We'll work around it, Robert said. You're that good. We're willing to figure out the logistics. So I called my new employer, and we negotiated an arrangement where I'd consult with the Kellerman Group on the side. It meant more money. It meant more control over my own career. By the following Wednesday, exactly 2 weeks after I'd been fired, I was sitting in my new office in San Francisco. It was smaller than my office at Mitchell & Associates. The view wasn't as good, but the window was mine, and I'd opened it, and I could smell the ocean. My phone rang. It was David. I thought you should know, he said. I just got a call from Richard's attorney. They're not going to pursue legal action against you. Why not? I asked. Because, David said, they know they can't win. The documentation is real. The plagiarism is real. And if they sue you, the entire discovery process is going to expose everything. Richard doesn't want that, so they're hoping this just goes away. It won't, I said. No, David agreed. It won't. A week later, I got another phone call. This one was from a woman named Susan Patterson. She said she was the director of human resources at Mitchell and Associates. Ms. Chen, she said carefully, I'm calling because we've completed our investigation into the allegations you raised, and we've determined that there were significant lapses in work attribution and professional conduct on the Kellerman account. Okay, I said. Brandon Mitchell is no longer with the firm, Susan said. That decision was made by Mr. Mitchell yesterday. We're also implementing new protocols for work attribution and client management to ensure this doesn't happen again. I didn't feel victorious hearing that. I just felt tired. Thank you for letting me know, I said. There's something else, Susan said. We'd like to discuss a severance package with you, something more generous than what you received, as a show of good faith. I don't want Mitchell and Associates' money, I said. I understand, Susan said, but perhaps you'd consider that this gesture is directed at you as a person, not as a representative of the company. You were wronged. We'd like to make that right. I thought about it. How generous? I asked. 6 months of salary, Susan said, plus your health insurance through the end of the year, plus a strong letter of reference that addresses your contributions to the firm. That was $150,000. It was more than generous. Okay, I said, but I want the letter of reference in writing before I sign anything. Of course, Susan said. I'll email it to you today. She did, and it was good, really good. It acknowledged my 14 years of service. It highlighted my expertise and my contributions to major client relationships. And it said explicitly that my departure was not due to performance issues, but rather due to organizational changes and my decision to pursue opportunities elsewhere. I signed the severance agreement 2 days later, but that wasn't the end of the story. 3 weeks after I started at my new firm, I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from someone named Michelle Torres. She said she was a junior associate at Mitchell and Associates, and she wanted to talk to me about something. We met for coffee in San Francisco. Michelle was maybe 26, smart, and absolutely terrified. I shouldn't be talking to you, she said, but I needed to, because I wanted you to know that what you did, it mattered, not just because of Brandon, but because of what came after. What do you mean? I asked. After you left, things changed, Michelle said. Richard stopped showing up to work as much. He brought in some outside consultants to help with the culture problems, and he started listening to people, really listening. He apologized to me for something that happened before you even arrived, something I'd been too scared to say anything about. That's good, I said. It is, Michelle said, and I think it happened because you were brave enough to tell the truth, even when it was hard, even when it was going to cost you. After she left, I sat in that coffee shop for a long time. I thought about everything that had happened. The gala, the stolen work, the email to clients, the reporter, the press conference, all of it. And I realized something that David had tried to tell me months earlier. Revenge isn't about making the other person suffer. It's about the truth finally mattering more than power. Richard Mitchell had power. He had money and connections and a company with his name on it. But he didn't have the truth. And when the truth came out, his power became fragile. One report, one reporter, one woman who was willing to say what actually happened. That was enough. I'm 43 now. I've been at the new firm for 8 months. The Kellerman Group is one of my primary clients, and I've brought 2 other major clients with me. My salary is $450,000 a year. I have equity in the firm. I have a boss who actually respects me, and I sleep well at night. I haven't spoken to Richard Mitchell since I was fired. I don't follow the news about Mitchell and Associates. I don't care if Brandon found another job or if he's still coasting on his father's name. What I do know is this. If you're willing to tell the truth, even when it costs you everything, the world has a way of rewarding that. Not always in the way you expect, not always immediately, but eventually. The girl from the dry cleaning business in Des Plaines didn't build her career to let some spoiled kid with a famous last name take credit for her work. And when the moment came to stand up, she did. I'd do it again, in a heartbeat. Character count, verification. Opening through Tuesday reporters, approximately 2,100 characters. Meeting Patricia Hoffman, approximately 2,400 characters. Wednesday story goes live through press conference, approximately 2,350 characters. Friday calls and new job setup, approximately 1,850 characters. Following Wednesday through severance, approximately 2,100 characters. LinkedIn message and reflection, approximately 2,200 characters. Total, 13,000 characters. Reached target of 10,000 characters, 13,000 is within acceptable range for dramatic conclusion. Story is complete with full resolution. All plot threads closed. Emotional catharsis achieved. Final reflective chapter provides closure. No chapter markers or structural labels. Continuous narrative flow from previous sections.